The engine is off. I got everything stripped off of it that I need to, and I got all the holes plugged. The only holes I don't have plugged are for the primer lines. Now I got to figure out what to do with it. I was hoping I could just set it down on the floor underneath my platform there, my work platform, but I just got to measuring it, and it's too tall for that. It's too heavy for me to move by myself. Anyway, it's ready to go in the crate once I take the other engine out of the crate. I got to get it over there where I can hoist it up and start putting the stuff on it that goes on it before it goes on the engine, on the airplane. But I kind of got a mess over there on the workbench with all of the stuff, tools and everything that I've been taking off of here. I've got to get that cleaned up, straightened up, so I got a place to work. I still need to take the carburetor air box off the carburetor and to check out the oil cooler and make sure it's serviceable, go over the baffling and make sure it's all still good and stuff before I put on, see what repairs it needs to be done on it. A couple other little things like that. Dig out some more parts and pieces, whatnot to go on there. I measured the hoses out that I'm going to change. I forgot that the two hoses that went on the oil cooler, I just changed those. But the fuel line hose needs to be changed, and probably should change that oil pressure line too. Well, those were over 20 years old now, so it's not a bad idea to change those lines. Anyway, I guess I better get to work and get the place straightened out so that I can see what I'm doing. I was able to figure out a way to get that engine out of the way. I had it sitting on that platform, and when I measured it, it was too high to fit underneath the platform on the floor. But I had it sitting up on some chunks of that 4-inch thick styrofoam stuff that I used for the insulation to block off the eaves up here in the wall of the hangar. But it was pretty high. It was too high to fit underneath that platform. Well, I took one of those sheets of styrofoam and took the handsaw and just ripped it to about, well, this is the leftover piece. This one's about 1.5 inches thick, and so it was 4 inches, so the other one's about 2.5 inches thick, or a little over 2 inches thick. And anyway, I got it put down on the floor, and I got it down low enough where I could put that platform back on there. I also had some 1-inch foam, high density foam piece that was around here from shipping something up here in, and I cut it into chunks and laid it on top of the floats and put that platform on top of those pieces of foam, and that raises the platform up a little higher. Now it doesn't really need it, but like the old lady said when she blew her nose in the gravy, every little bit helps. Plus it helps insulate between the stringers on that platform and the floats and keeps them from digging in there and maybe flattening the floats out or damaging them any or anything. So took a parts washer, siphon gun, stuck in a can of paint thinner there, and sprayed off that engine before I put it down there away. And then I sprayed off the firewall, cleaned it off, and then wiped it down with some rags and got it cleaned up a little bit. I worked on my tools a little bit, got those organized, picked up, straightened up somewhat. I got my workbench kind of straightened up a little bit. At least I got all my tools and stuff picked up off of it. And then all the different hardware and whatnot, I got it picked up and put in a couple of trays. Some of the stuff was greasy, dirty. I found a little pan and I put some paint thinner in that, and I put that stuff in there to soak to get the grease, clean it up and stuff. I ordered another one of those radiant heaters to mount up above the workbench to come down on it. So when the guys are working on the workbench, it's not quite so cold, or they can stand there and work on it. And it's in the post office, so I go pick it up Monday. There's the accessories. Got the carburetor. I just took the carburetor heat box, the carburetor air box off of it. I've got to wash it down a little bit, and there's a little bit of rust on it. A couple spots I'll have to clean up. So far, I don't see anything wrong with it. It's in pretty good shape. The carburetor's there. Of course, the carburetor's going in the box with the engine. Gets shipped back with the core. There's the alternator and the starter. The alternator's almost new. I just put it on. Well, I put it on year before last, but doesn't have much time on it. It's still in really good shape, even sitting out there in the front of the engine in the rain and snow and everything else. And then we've got the oil filter adapters laying there. Don't really have to do much for it except clean it up, put a new gasket on it, and I'll bolt it back onto the new engine, and of course a new oil filter. And the starter is right back there, and again, the starter is in good shape too. Shouldn't have to do anything with it. I've got a couple other old starters here. That one's a heavier duty one for this bigger engine. I've got a couple of the regular Skytech starters that I used for quite a while. They kept burning out, and I've got a couple of those up here in boxes someplace. I should send them in and get them rebuilt or something, I don't know. Air filter is right there. I'll put it away someplace. And then I've got the baffling over here. I'm going to have to, I'm looking it over and I don't really see where I need any repairs on it. Some of the felt is not in very good shape. I should see if I can get some new felt for that maybe. But I need to go over that, clean it up, check it out for any cracks or anything like that, and see what I can do with it, or see if I need to do anything with it. I've got the left rear baffle is laying on the floor. I still have the oil cooler mounted to it. I looked at it when I took it off the engine and it looks like it's okay, so hopefully I don't have to do anything with it, but I'll need to go over it and make sure that it's in good shape. It had a tendency to crack out with the weight of that oil cooler on there and all the vibration and stuff. I've repaired it several times, but I think the last time I repaired it, I did a pretty good job on it. It didn't look like it cracked out this time, so I think it's going to be okay, but I need to check it out and check the oil cooler out and everything. But so far everything is looking pretty good. I spray everything down with corrosion block, corrosion inhibitor stuff. All these parts and stuff need to be washed down, get that stuff off of them, and then cleaned up. And any corrosion needs to be taken care of, and then, like I said, checked, repaired as necessary, and we'll put it all back in service, hopefully. With the engine change, I'm going to change my throttle cable. This throttle cable's been in here since I bought the airplane. The outer shield on it here is rubbed on the exhaust, the muffler a little bit, and it's worn off some of the shielding on it and whatnot, but it's been in here for 20 years, over 20 years, and I didn't change it last time I changed the engine when I had the engine overhauled last time. And when I rebuilt the airplane, I put the old one back in. It still works, but you know, after 20 years, it's time to change it. And with the old airframe the way it was, the boot cowl and everything, the only way to do that would have been to crawl in underneath it and get up underneath and take this bracket off. There's a bracket on one of these frames that come in from the fuselage, come over to the firewall. There's a bracket on that holds it up, and then of course it attaches back here at the throttle quadrant itself. At this piece underneath here, I'd had to crawl underneath the instrument panel to get it, and I'm too old and fat to do that anymore. When I built this airplane, I built it so that I could take it apart. Took the windshield off. That's just a matter of taking a whole bunch of screws out and loosening up a little bit of RTV where it was sealed up on there around some of the edges. And then there's a bunch of screws to take off the boot cowl here on the top. And now I've got easy access down inside of here to get in here and change that throttle cable without breaking my back or standing on my head and underneath there and cursing a whole bunch. The other thing I've got to do is I'm going to change my master circuit breaker. I've been having trouble with that coming loose once in a while and kicking out the alternator. So I got a new circuit breaker. I'm going to change that. Anyway, it's not a piece of cake to take this off, but it's not that difficult, so might as well do it and get in here. And then that gives me a chance to look in at everything in here and make sure everything is still copacetic in here. Everything is looking good. Then I had to take those wing root covers off anyway to inspect in there. That's one of the things you ought to inspect during an annual, a 100-hour, at least an annual, is the attach fittings and stuff for the wings attach. All the fuel lines run through there on both sides. Wiring runs through there. You've got wiring that runs out to the navigation light on the right wing, navigation light and landing light on the left wing, and then the wires for the headsets and stuff like that in there, so, and the antenna cables. So anyway, that's a good idea to check all that stuff. There's the throttle quadrant here. There's the throttle handle. It moves back and forth. That's idle, and that's full rich, mixture of full throttle. See right here, there's a cotter pin right there, and that throttle is just a bent rod that comes through a hole right there in the throttle, and the cotter pin on there they got to take out, And that'll take that out. And then down here is a nut. That's where it attaches, and there's a friction there. It's basically just a gasket material on there for friction, and that's how you adjust the friction on the throttle. I get that cotter pin out of there and pop that shaft out of there, out of the throttle handle, and that will be done there. And then over here on this side, this is where the throttle comes through right here, and there's the hold down for it. There's just an 8L clamp on this bar right here that holds it steady, so holds it solid, and then it runs down around through there, through a grommet on the firewall and out. So anyway, that's it. Pretty easy to change like this. It would have been a lot different laying upside down underneath there. Took a look here in the wing root, and I don't see any problems in there. The bolts are all nice and tight. There's nothing compressed in there or anything. There's no leaks in any of the fuel hoses. All the wiring, antenna cables, stuff like that, they're all routed still good. There's no chafing on any of that or any abrasion on any of that. So that looks good. Same with the other side. And so far everything in here looks pretty good. Looks like a mess, but everything looks pretty good. No wires chafing or broken wires or anything like that. Of course, everything was working anyway when we parked it. There's always a chance of getting mice in there or something, chewing something up, but everything looks good. The new throttle cable is attached to the throttle handle and run through the firewall. It comes in there. I got it clamped down to the bar where it goes. Now this clamp was sliding a little bit on this tube that it clamps to, so I took a couple of hose clamps and sandwiched it between there, clamped them down tight. I put a little bit of RTV on there, and that'll glue that on there and stop it from sliding, but the clamps will stop it for sure. So that routes down in there. Got a little bit of chafing protector on there to keep it from chafing on the tubing right there, the steel tubing as it goes by, and the fuel hose, and it comes out the firewall and right there, and the mixture cable comes out right there too. Now there's still one more clamp that has to be changed. The old one is still clamped down here to that, and that clamps it in position for the carburetor. So anyway, they might have to change the geometry of that a little bit or something when we get the engine on there, but I can take that old cable off there and get it out of the way. That's the only thing left to do for that. Oh, that looks pretty good. Well, I got that windshield opened up and that stuff out of the way there, the boot cowling off. I decided I was going to work on this electrical stuff a little bit. Been having a little bit of trouble with the circuit breaker kicking out. The main circuit breaker, alternator circuit breaker, kicking out on me when I was flying. And I'm pretty sure the main problem was that the leads would get loose here on the tabs. It would throw the circuit breaker and it wasn't making good contact. And these circuit breakers have a tendency, I think, to get a little bit weak after a while, and especially after being thrown a couple times, and this one doesn't feel real snappy. So I bought a new circuit breaker for that, planning on fixing it. See, this one's a lot snappier. And I got a 60 amp circuit breaker for that, but it's way too big. It's a $5 circuit breaker, a good quality one, but it's way too big to fit in there. So I took this one out, I got the numbers off of it, and I went in online and looked the numbers up on it and ordered a new one. So it'll probably be a week or two before I get it. I get that put back together. But meanwhile, I can keep working on other things on the airplane. Circuit breaker that I got doesn't fit in there, and after taking the old one out and examining it, I really don't want to put it back in there. The threads are stripped out on it. I probably could get a larger size screw and stick in there to hold those leads down on, but I've got a new circuit breaker ordered. It'll probably take a week or two to get here. Ordered it yesterday and I checked and I haven't got it shipped yet, and once it gets in the mail it'll only take about 3 days to get here. So but I got actually the old control for the cabin heater put back in there, and I've got the throttle control in there. Those are the only things I really needed to get on there, or that was easier to get on there while the engine was off. So technically now I could go ahead and put that engine back on there. Well, I can start getting it ready to mount back up, because I can do all of this stuff with the engine on there. What's left to do, putting the boot cowl back on and all that, can be done with the engine on there. It's not a big deal. Well, I can do another thing. There's a few more things to do inside the cockpit, of course. Checking out my cables and the cable runs, make sure there's no fraying on any of the cables or anything on the rudders, and a couple other things in there. Most of it is all pretty good though. I don't have to take the fuel selector valve apart, because the old ones you had to do some work, lubricate those and check those every 50 hours or so, but this new one is a Dakota Cub fuel selector valve, so that doesn't have to be taken apart. But one of the things I should do is to check the fuel pump, make sure there's no leaks in there. I know there's no leaks in there, but it's still a good idea to check it. So I pulled this back seat out, and now I've got to take this little bulkhead here out of there and take that under seat storage pan out of there, and then I can get access to check on that fuel pump, auxiliary fuel pump. So anyway, I've taken the seat belts off. The seat's out. I've taken the seat belts off. I've got these little angle trim pieces in here that I've got to take out, and maybe loosen up a couple of bolts or screws back there on that rear baggage compartment floorboard. Then I can pop this under seat storage compartment out of there. Now, I'm thinking about maybe putting some kind of a inspection cover in there, inspection hole in there, so that we can see through that without having to take that out every time we want to inspect it. Have to think about that. Well, anyway, that's the project right now. So then there's other things to do. Basically lube all the controls and check all the pulleys and stuff like that. Check all the fasteners. I've looked pretty close at the bolts that attach the wing on. Those are good. Everything looks good up in there. So it's a matter of checking the flap travel and attachments and everything, and make sure they're good, and the ailerons, aileron cables, and of course the struts. And then I've got to do some stuff on the tail there. I've got to take the inspection covers off the horizontal stabilizers there and grease that jack screw and stuff back there and inspect all that stuff back there. I haven't looked at any of that stuff since we brought the plane home, but I check it out pretty good every time I pre-flight the airplanes. I think there's a clevis down here on one of the clevises down here on the water rudder cables that I want to change out. But other than that, I think everything is in pretty good shape. But we'll go ahead and go inspect it anyway and check it all out.